Hey guys, I hope you're all doing very well. Welcome back to another video. And today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves. Um, it's an average movie, I guess. I don't really have a lot to say about this film, to be honest. I mean, I will say though the trailer of this film did look not so impressive to me. I was very unsure what this movie wanted to achieve. I could tell that it tried to be a comedy or a fantasy action film, but yeah, and that's certainly kind of what I got watching Dungeons and Dragons. And yeah, it's an above average film. It's not a massive standout in most films I've seen or any fantasy films, but yeah, I would say watching it definitely exceeded my expectations from watching the trailer, but it's it's pretty decent. Now, I will state that I do have more negative, bad things to say about this film than good things. Um, so, some of the problems I have with this movie, although I know this movie is supposed to be a comedy, most of the comedy just didn't work. It was very flat, very soulless, and it just dragged for a lot of time in the film, which I do think this movie does lack moments a lot. So, I mean, also the characters in this film were a bit. They weren't really that interesting. They didn't really have so much of an interesting backstory as much. And they still kind of played even their backstory, like going back in time, was still the comedy. And it kind of distracted the whole narrative of the film, really. So, Chris Pine's character he plays as Edgin, he's kind of one of the main characters. And he doesn't really do anything really. I never really see him do much apart from literally just playing his instrument, like his uke looking instrument. I mean, he doesn't do anything. He kind of looks very bastardized really, and he kind of allows Holger, who's played by Michelle Rodriguez, to do everything. I mean, most of the time you see Holger, she just looks like some sort of female John Wick. Just somehow she's a woman and she could somehow beat 100 men in a small vicinity around her. It doesn't. It was just very weird how things worked in this film. I don't know why they did that. But yeah, I do also think the amount of times that they played the comedy throughout this film, I do think it kind of affected the overall plot really. Like I will say on its own, the plot is not that interesting nor original. It's very basic. So basically, Edgar and Holger are captured in prison. They escape prison, and ever since then, for the many years they've been in prison, they want to. Edgin wants to save his daughter from Forge, and he's not able to, so he has to forge a team to do that. And that's really it. It just doesn't change very much. The sequencing and the pacing from the movie doesn't really allow for any sort of moment to happen because there's so many times they just drag the comedy too much, and it's just really it was really tiresome and soulless really throughout most of the time. And there's just so many times I feel like in this movie they just a lot of the male characters just don't have any relevance. It was just like Chris Pine's character as Edgin was just he didn't really fight or do much in this film. And there was also a cameo appearance where Bradley Cooper played as like a small person, and then his wife is a taller, normal human being, and it just really really put some big question marks. Thinking why are they trying to think that this is somehow funny to make the men look stupid and the woman the better people is. I really feel like it's just came across as such a soulless tribe to think that they could just make women the most important people in this film, and I just didn't really think it really worked out very well. And I think this whole woke agenda, this following the current thing, is just becoming such a soulless tribe to watch. I just couldn't feel this movie as much as I did. But yeah, I will say there are some good aspects of this film that I actually did enjoy. I do think the superpowers a lot of the characters have were actually pretty good and powerful. So I think there was one character in particular. I think his name is Simon, and he has like some powers as well, where he uses like uses a crown or a helmet looking thing, and he could sort of use like some sort of force to push enemies out. Also, there's another aspect that Simon has. He uses a staff, which he can use for teleporting. And I think throughout the film, it actually came across as an interesting concept. You know, I'm sure maybe if people are familiar with the Portal games, you know, you use a portal gun and it just, you teleport from one area to another. That was kind of the idea that they did with this film. And it kind of did grow on me. It was actually kind of interesting, and they have some good moments in the scene. There was some comedy in those scenes that actually I did kind of felt the humor a little bit, but I think it was an interesting idea. And they do have some good moments as well where they have an arena scene and they have like a maze to go through, and they kind of have to survive against animals and some sort of other enemies. So it definitely had some interesting moments that I actually did kind of enjoy, and I think in some sense it kind of changed the overall feel of the film because it didn't feel too short, but it actually had enough to kind of at least bring some sort of sense of anticipation and some sort of ways that it could get people hooked into these scenes really. Now I'll also say in this film that you do have one main villain in this movie that kind of had most of the screen time, which was Safina, who is a red wizard, and for most of the time I watched it, she wasn't really come across very powerful or strong. I mean, there was one scene where she did like a ritual and it kind of like showed her true powers a bit, but apart from that, that was really it. Some of her superpowers she does in some of the action scenes didn't come across very, you know, strong enough to really sort of change the overall feel of the movie. It was still kind of, it was good, but it didn't like make me feel anticipated or excited as much. But I think sometimes the film, and mostly at the end, did get its moments that I think did change the film. But most of the time, it didn't really fit with the whole consistent pacing of its plot, really, and also the sequencing of the movie. It was very inconsistent into delivering that. But yeah, overall, if I had to rate Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves, I'm probably gonna have to give it a 6 out of 10. Um, it does have good moments, like I said. Like some of the action scenes did look good, and some of the powers and the spells looked good. But I think a lot of the times watching the movie, it just dragged too much. The pacing wasn't very well structured and inconsistent, especially delivering its dialogue, especially with the comedy. That it just didn't work for me. Some people in the cinema had some good time with the comedy. I don't know. I don't really get it, but if they have something to say about it, it'll be interesting to know what was really delivered because I certainly didn't really follow the comedy very well in this one. I felt it was too generic. It sounded pretty much the same sort of comedy I've seen from previous other trope movies or corporate media movies before. It just didn't change very much. But yeah, overall, I do think this movie is an above average movie. It certainly exceeded the expectations from the trailer, but I'm not gonna tell people to go crazy to watch it. It probably isn't really gonna hit it for a lot of people, and I'm somewhat in the middle of it, I would say. But I think some of the good moments did work and stood out more. And yeah, that's about it. See you later.